Alright, I think I'm about to get started here. As a brief introduction, what I'm making this video of is the beginnings of a replication of a device invented by Wayne Travis, and more information about this can be found out on his website at hydroenergyrevolution.com. Basically, it's a layered buoyancy device that's claimed to be able to produce excess energy. And I'm not sure I'm fully convinced yet, but I'm willing to do some experimentation and trying to find out if I can make up my mind for myself. So what we're looking at here, let me back up a little bit, is what will be the bottom of a 5-layer Z. And if we look a little closer, you can see right now that I have 2 layers completed, what's called a 1U, and this is a 8-inch outside diameter tank with a 7.5-inch inner wall. And in this device, this is called a retainer. Now over here, this is what's going to be a pod and riser combination. The top plate is a 1/2 inch thick, and those rings that you can see cut are to help support the inner walls. There's a bottom in this one, in the center piece, and right now that is a 6.5 inch diameter empty volume. And what I'm looking at over here is a screw jack that I can use to raise and lower this container of water. That's a 4-inch diameter cylinder that's 12 inches tall. And let's see what we can get it to do today. My camera assistant's being a little flaky here. How's that? Right now the container, the input volume, is at the exact same elevation as the base unit. I'm going to insert this so that those walls and retainers overlap. And then we're going to bring up just a little bit of water height. Bring this up slow. And I'm watching for water to start entering, and it is just a little bit right now. I'm going to stop. And let me bring the camera over a little closer. And maybe you can see this, maybe not. Right now there's just about an inch of water in that air gap between the centerpiece and the next riser wall, which is about a 1/16 of an inch thick. I'm going to bring in a little bit more water here. I've measured this a couple times, and it's just about 3 inches that starts to float this thing. I'm going to stop raising the water. We'll let it balance a little bit. And it's just starting to get light. Bring it up a little bit more. Not quite there yet. Just about. There we go. One more turn maybe. Just wiggling. Let me grab a ruler. And right now we're looking at just over 3.5 inches of head that is floating a 4-pound cylinder. So now the next goal is to see what happens when we overflow that inner cylinder and start to get a second buoyancy layer around the first one. First, I'll show you how much water we've actually entered in. This input container, when I started, had just under a gallon of water in it. And it's only come down a little bit. I haven't measured the exact volume here. And again, this is a 4-inch tube, and I've taken just about 1 inch of water out of it. Handy little jug for balance, and I've measured this out at 8.5 pounds. We're just going to weight this down. It's probably not going to be enough to let me completely flood the cylinder. One thing to mention, right now there's a small air bleed hole in the top, so that as water overflows, it's not going to be trapping any air right now. One of the main reasons I'm making this particular video is one of the forum members asked me to try to show an effect that I noticed during one of my early experiences yesterday with a very lightly weighted pod retainer. It does have one curious effect. We'll see that in just a minute here. Waiting for the water to balance out, see how high I need to go. We're just starting to float a little bit. We might not be able to do it with 8.5 pounds. Yep, we're starting to float. I was expecting it to take just about 14. I may have to hold this down to get it to actually flood. I'm really trying to do now is just set up anyway. There we go. Need a little more water than that. I'm looking for about 6 inches, about halfway up. So we can get a good picture of the changes in water levels as they fill in these gaps. I could just pour some water in, but the other thing I'm trying to get a real handle on is what volume of fluid I need to be able to put into the system in order to do the pre-charge and the lift and get back out. And I know I started with 7 pints, about 7 pounds of water. And there we go. Give it another shot. And right now, everything's balanced out. You can see there's actually 2 layers of water there. And now I'm going to take my input volume back down. And hopefully you'll be able to see the water around that center ring start to drop. As it flows back into my input cylinder. This system is really intended to run not all the way down and not all the way up, but a nice happy medium where it can balance between 2 loaded states. And we got our water coming back out now pretty good. Oh, it's coming down. Now initially I showed you that I had 3.5 inches of head around the pod in order to float it, unloaded. And we're going to see that that is going to be reduced quite a lot because the outer layer of trapped water is going to help support that flotation. And we're sinking pretty good now. We're in a position where it can no longer float. We're not quite empty. And the water levels in the that are trapped between the layers are just about equal. Taking it down a little bit more. we're just about balanced. Now to plug my vent hole. This is just a small 1/8 inch threaded hole. Snug it up here just a little bit. And now we'll bring some water back in. I'm not sure if you're seeing, we're getting a little bit of a difference in height developing between the layers. And we're getting just a little bit of water around the base of the internal. Now the intent was to get this to a point where it was just barely floating and measure those two heads, the difference in those two water layers and the bottom one, to see if it was a difference from the 3.5 inches without the additional layer. And right now, we're just floating. And if it does what it did to me last night, that difference is going to go away. And the bottom is going to increase. And it does look like it's getting a little smaller. And what do we got right now? We have about 3/4 of an inch. And on the bottom, we have about 1.5 inches. And it's starting to look like it's going to make a layer out of me. I'm seeing 1 3/4 at the bottom. And still 3/4 at the top. And I guess I don't mind being proven wrong. More to come.